Hello, dear students. Today we are starting with trigonometry. Trigonometry. Now, first of all, we want to know how to find the values of angles that is more than 90 degrees. Now, first of all, let's look at this circle. Now, in the circle, the first angle, the first quarter here is known as the first quadrant. This is the first quadrant. In the first quadrant, the angle within the first quadrant is named to be theta 1. The angle within the first quadrant are from angle 0 to 90. So that's the angle between the first quadrants. So in the first quadrant, the value of sine theta is positive, cos theta is also positive, and value for tan theta in the first quadrant is positive. Then we are going to move anti-clockwise. So from this, we move to this side, which this one side gives us the second quadrant. In the second quadrant, the angle that is theta 2, the angle in the second quadrant are between angle 91 to angle 180. Angle 91 to angle 180. So the equivalent of this angle in the first quadrant, that means we calculate it by saying 180 minus the theta 2, which will give us its equivalent in the first quadrant. So in the second quadrant, the value of sine theta is what? Plus the value of cos theta in the second quadrant is negative, and the value of tan theta in the second quadrant is also negative. Then we have the third quadrant. In the third quadrant, the angle within the third quadrant are angle 181 to 270. The equivalent of this angle in the first quadrant in the angle in third quadrant minus 180 will give you its equivalent in the third quadrant. In the first quadrant rather. Then in the third quadrant, the angle of sine theta is negative, the angle of cos theta here there is negative, and the angle of tan theta is positive. Then let's come to the fourth quadrant. In the fourth quadrant, the angle within the fourth quadrant are angle 271 to 360. Its equivalent in the first quadrant is 360 minus the angle in the fourth quadrant. So in the fourth quadrant, the value of sine theta is negative, value of cos theta is positive, and value of tan theta is what? Negative. So in summary, you realize that in the first quadrant, all sine theta, cos theta, and tan theta are all positive. In the second quadrant, only sine is positive. In the third quadrant, only tan is positive. And in the fourth quadrant, only cos is positive. So that means we are having A representing all, S representing sine, which is positive in the second quadrant, T represent tan, which is positive in the third quadrant, and C here represent cos, which is positive in the fourth quadrant. So to make it easier for you to learn, you can say the first one is for all students take coffee. A for all, for everything, S for sine, T for tan, and C for cos. Now let's look at how you will apply it to look for the angles. If you look for any angle between angle 0 to 90, the value will always be giving you positive. So for every sine theta, cos theta, tan theta, from angle 0 to 90 will always be positive.
Why now?
When you look for now, let's look at this. If we are told to look for sine 143, sine 143, you know 143 is between, so it's an angle you find in the second quadrant because it's within angle 91 to 180. So it's an angle you find in second quadrant. So in second quadrant, you realize that our sine is positive. So it's going to be positive. So sine, then you are now going to write the equivalent of this angle in the second, which is 180 minus theta 2. So that means say 180 minus 143. So 180 minus 143 will give us 37. So it means the value, we said the value of sine 143 should be what? Positive. That positive. So the answer, we now look for sine 37 in your four figure table, which will give you 0.6018. So your answer will be plus 0.6018. So let's look at another example. We are having cos 115. Now 115 is still in the second quadrant. In the second quadrant, cos is what? Negative. So that is when we have a negative here. Now say cos. The equivalent of 115 in the second quadrant will be 180 minus theta 2. So now say 180 minus 115. So which will give us what? 180 minus 115 will give us 65. So the answer you get, that means it is going to be negative. Then you now look for cos 65. Cos 65 will give us what? 0.4226. So since in second quadrant the value of cos is negative, the answer will be minus 0.4226. Then in C, we are told to look for tan 125. So 125 is still within the second quadrant. So that means, and tan in the second quadrant is negative. So that means it is going to be a negative value. Then tan, in the equivalent of tan 125 in the second quadrant is what? 180 minus 125 in the first quadrant. That will now be 180 minus 125, which gives us tan 55. So since the value should be a negative, it will be minus tan 55 will give us 1.428. So your answer will be minus 1.428. Then another example, sine 220. 220 is in the third quadrant between 181 to 270. So then in the third quadrant, we realize that sine is what? Negative. In the third quadrant, sine is negative. So the value will be what? Negative sine. We now write the equivalence in the first quadrant, which is 220 minus 180. 220 minus 180. So 220 minus 180 is what? 40. So minus sine 40. What is sine 40? That will give us 0.6428. 0.6428. So in the third quadrant should be what? Minus 0.6428. Then E, we have cos 236. Cos 236. 236 in the third quadrant is going to be what? It should be in the third quadrant, and since it is cos, in the third quadrant, cos is what? Negative. So that is having negative sign here. Then that means you now have cos 236 minus 180. 236 minus 180 is what? 56. So that means we have minus cos 56. Cos 56 is 0.5992. So since in the third quadrant cos is negative, it's going to be a minus 0.5992. Then we are looking for tan 242. Tan 242 is what? 242 is in the third quadrant. See in the third quadrant. So that means you now have, and tan in the third quadrant is going to be a positive. So that is why it's going to be positive. So the equivalent of 242 in the first quadrant will be 242. minus 180, which is what? 62. So, and since we know that the value for tan in the third quadrant is positive, so that means we'll be having what? Tan 62 is 1.881. That will be plus 1.881. Then another example, we're having sine 310. 310 should be in the third quadrant, in the fourth quadrant rather. So, and sine in the fourth quadrant is what? Negative. So it's going to be minus sine. Then the equivalent of 310 in the first quadrant is 360 minus 310, which is what? 50. So minus sine 50. So you look for the sine of 50 is 0.7660. So in the fourth quadrant, so sine 50 will give us what? It will now be what? Minus 0.7660. Then H, we are having cos 285. Cos 285 is what? Is in the fourth quadrant. In the fourth quadrant, 285 is in the fourth quadrant. So in the fourth quadrant, cos is what? Positive. So that is why it will be plus cos. The equivalent of 285 in the fourth quadrant will be 360 minus 285. 360 minus 285 is 75. So you look for cos 75. Cos of 75 is 0.2588. So that means you now have what? Plus 0.2588. Then let's look at the last example. The last example, you are having tan 334. So in the third quadrant, tan is what? Negative. So you put it there, that is negative. So that means in the equivalent of 334 in the first quadrant will be 360 minus 334. 360 minus 334 is what? 26. So minus 10. So that means you now look for the tan of 26, which is 0.4871. So in the fourth quadrant, tan is negative. It's going to be 0.4871. So for your work practice, evaluate the values of the following angles: cos 50, sine 50, tan 50, sine 140, cos 140, tan 140. Then sine 230, cos 230, tan 230. Then we have sine 300, cos 300, and tan 300. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you.